Hey, I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is Let It Rip. There's a new president and administration with a new agenda. But now many of those who put Joe Biden in office with their votes are looking for him to set policies that address their concerns. One of the biggest tests will be, can a centrist Democrat deliver enough of the progressive agenda to satisfy progressive voters? Already, education and student loan debt are shaping up to be an area of tension among Democrats. We'll look at the issue and the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine in communities of color. This is Let It Rip. Student loan debt is a huge issue for Black voters, and they want to see the Biden administration do something about it. Here are some numbers. 45 million people are dealing with student loan debt. 86.6% of Black students take out federal loans to attend four-year colleges, compared to 59.9% of white students. The average Black grad ends up with $7,400 more in student debt than their white counterpart. It's a heavy burden, with many paying more than $300 a month on their loans. 5 times more Black borrowers default on their loans than whites, and that could be because Black graduates earn less money out of college. Black grads earn $3.34 less an hour on average than their white peers, making it harder to pay off the loan. All this has a huge effect on the lives of young people, and experts say eliminating student loan debt would narrow the racial wealth gap for young families. To fix the problem, some are calling for the total elimination of all student loan debt. Others, including the Biden administration, support canceling a portion of the debt, $10,000. Here to help us dive into the issue, we have New York City Council member and chairwoman of the council's Higher Education Committee, Inez Barron, and the program director of an organization called Student Debt Crisis, Cody Hounanian. Welcome to both of you. Councilmember Barron, the amount of money we're talking about is huge, and the hardships are huge as well. Is simply canceling the debt the way to fix the problem?
Well, the amount of debt, as you've said, is huge, $1.5 trillion. It's the largest form of debt in all of the debt categories, more than mortgages and more than credit card debt. But certainly we know that those families that are low-income families and that have not just the burden of tuition, but the other associated educational costs of going to college that are also burdening them, which they have to bear while they're paying this tuition or trying to meet those tuition costs. So we're talking about textbooks, we're talking about travel, we're talking about childcare. When I went to school, childcare was not really an issue because the so-called traditional student came right out of high school. But now we have students that have interrupted their career path, their education path, and have done other things before coming to school. So they have childcare costs, they have all kinds of burdens. And mind you now, all of this is in an era when the state, particularly a state like New York, has not done its appropriate burden or proportion rather of sustaining tuition support, sustaining the cost of maintaining the city university and the state university programs.
Mm-hmm. Cody, what's your organization's take on it?
Well, I appreciate the council members' opinion on this topic. I'm glad that leaders on all levels of government, both at the federal level, the state level, even our local and municipal elected officials are taking on this issue. We call it a crisis because we see it as such. It is something that is preventing people from purchasing homes, starting families, small business formation. Student debt has really impacted all corners of people's lives. Because of that, we feel it is an all hands on deck approach. We need everyone to take this crisis seriously. With that type of crisis response type of approach, we do feel that broad-based student debt cancellation, particularly in the era of the COVID-19 pandemic, is the solution that we need, not only to provide relief to get through this unprecedented crisis, but also to stimulate the entire economy. This is an economic stimulus. The more debt we cancel, the more burden we lift off of Americans from all sorts of backgrounds, and the more that they can participate in the economy. That means higher GDP, more jobs, and it can get us back to building back better, as the president has asked us to do, in a way that really will help the country thrive and prosper moving forward.
Now, you just mentioned President Joe Biden. He was recently asked during a town hall meeting if he would support or if he would just cancel $50,000, and he didn't mince words. Quite quickly, he said no. You know, he would go with $10,000. What was your reaction to that? We'll start with you on this one, Cody.
You know, I was taken aback by the president's tone when he responded to that question about student debt cancellation. From all other accounts, the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, you know, senator from New York, has had discussions with the administration in good faith, and they have been working together to come to the best plan of attack. The president has been clear. He wants Congress to introduce a piece of legislation to cancel student loan debt, but legislators have responded with what I think is a fair argument. We're in a crisis. We need bold relief, and we need it as fast as possible. And the best way to guarantee that in an immediate fashion is through an executive action. I will point out the president was quite stern when he responded and said, no, he wasn't going to cancel $50,000 in student debt. But what he also did say was he supports $10,000 in debt cancellation, which would still be a huge piece of relief, particularly for Black and brown borrowers who have been victimized by for-profit schools, have less debt totals, but have the biggest burden paying them back.
Councilmember, what did you think of the remark by the president?
I've been watching and been observing my colleagues in government for many, many years. And I have found that oftentimes those promises that were made to get to a particular position begin to morph or disappear or weaken when the opportunity comes to be able to act in a definitive way. So that's what I thought when I heard that. Now we know that, yes, there's still the forbearance pause, and that was the first thing that the president did. He extended it to September 30th. But a pause just means, you know, hold on. You know, when you press the pause button and then you press resume, it's back where it was. So there has been just a postponement of all of the fees, the debts, and the interest has also been postponed, and that's good. But it's just a stalling mechanism. So we want to see that the president use the Secretary of Education, encourage that person to use the power, to use the, I think it's section 432A of the Higher Education Act, that will allow the secretary to talk about what in fact can be done immediately. That person has the jurisdiction and the authority to do that and make a definitive move that will bring us some relief to this crisis. So we're in, yes, this health crisis, we're in this pandemic, but it's just layered on top of the education crisis, the economic crisis, the housing crisis, and the hunger crisis. And that's something else we haven't talked about. All of these students that are in schools, many of them are going to school hungry. Many of them, again, they're struggling with the tuition as well as the associated educational costs.
One of the things I noticed while researching this topic is when you would read the articles on canceling student loan debt, they could be very positive about doing that. But when you look at the comments section, you heard a much different picture from some people. Many of those people would say things like, oh no, wait a minute, you know, like I sacrificed to pay my student loan debt. Why should the government pay this debt? Why should a person be able to declare bankruptcy and not do that debt? I had to pay mine. What do you say to people who are thinking like that? I thought what you said was kind of interesting because we don't think about all the other costs that are associated with school. But what do you think about people who are looking at it that way?
I think that's a individualistic, sort of limited view that if we have the opportunity, and we do have the opportunity because we control what we emphasize in our budget, to allow someone else to benefit, to deny them that opportunity is somewhat selfish. So if something is beneficial and coming forth after you've had the opportunity, you can think about your nieces or nephews or cousins getting that benefit of that opportunity. But I think it's an obligation. I think that mandatory education should go from birth through at least 2 years beyond 12th grade, beyond secondary school. There was a time when mandatory education, compulsory education ended at the 8th grade. That was sufficient because of the times that we lived in. They felt that was sufficient. But eventually they realized, well, wait a minute, we've got to have this we've got to have this secondary level of education. And in the technology world in which we're living today, and in which we see how those who do not have those technological skills are disadvantaged. They can't even get on to the website to be able to try to make an appointment if they're eligible, if they want to get the vaccine. So we know that this is an age that we're living in that requires more than just an education through 12th grade. And I think it's a responsibility of the state to continue that education for at least 2 years beyond secondary school.
I agree with the council member. The discussion around student loan debt has to be framed in a way that is fair to the circumstance that's going on. So for those people that have a visceral reaction to a conversation that may be framed as, should we pay off people's student loans? I understand where that response is coming from, but let's reframe it. If you ask these folks, should people who are trying to better themselves through higher education spend a lifetime crushed by student debt? Most of these people would say no, of course not. And so what we have to then ask of people is, if you are willing to accept the premise that the system is broken, that our higher education system has left people in financial ruin, then we have to then come up with the proper solution in response to that. That is relieving student loan debt. And I think there's been recent polling that shows what people really believe about this topic without the emotional response. And a majority of people with student loan debt, in some polls, a majority of people who already paid back their student loan debt, and a majority of people who never had student loan debt in the first place, support canceling some level of student loan debt because they just recognize that this is immoral, it's unethical, and it's not the way we intended our higher education system to be.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there. It's an important issue that I think is going to become central to the Biden administration and their plans, and also progressives and people of color in the coming months and years to come. Could play a big role in future elections as well. I want to thank our guest, New York City Council member and chairman of the Higher Education Committee, Inez Barron, and also program director of an organization called Student Debt Crisis, Cody Hunanian, for helping us out to sort this all out. We're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll turn our attention to COVID-19 and the vaccine rollout. Are the shots reaching Black and brown communities hit hardest by the pandemic? And why are people who could get the jab reluctant and saying no to the vaccine? Stay with us. I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is Let It Rip.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. COVID-19 vaccinations are here and available, but the rollout has been spotty, with not enough vaccine available to meet the demand. Here in the city, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are making their way into the arms of New Yorkers, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine should help to meet the demand. But there are concerns following the release of new city data by zip code that shows big disparities in the city. According to the New York Times, the share of residents who are fully vaccinated in some wealthier Upper West and East Side zip codes is up to 8 times the rate in predominantly Black neighborhoods like East New York. It seems to show that the vaccine is flowing to areas where the residents are wealthy and white, and not to the hardest hit communities of color. So, what is the problem? Not enough effort to get the vaccine into those communities, or reluctance to take the shot? We have 2 guests, the Director of Pediatric Critical Care at SUNY Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn, Ramon Gist, and the former Vice President of Brookdale Hospital, Kari Edwards. Kari, let's start with you. In one zip code in Lenox Hill on the city's Upper East Side, the city found that 16% of adults have received both doses of the vaccine. By contrast, in East New York, it's only about 2% of adults that have received that vaccine. What's driving that disparity?
Two significant reasons. One, we as a people, Black and Brown people, historically have been distrusting to our healthcare services, our hospitals, our doctors, and vaccinations. You know, in East New York, when we were talking about rolling out pneumococcal pneumonia a couple of years ago, you know, our providers weren't even telling the folks about getting this vaccination. So folks aren't taking it because, one, they don't trust it. And the other side of it too is, you know, healthcare is a on the ground reality, and we're not meeting people where they are. So we may set up at a hospital and the hospital may be too far for us to go to. We're not putting it in enough schools and churches and making it accessible for folks who usually, especially with the 65 and olders, are not as mobile as we'd like them to be, especially in the winter.
Dr. Gist, what are you seeing from your vantage point?
You know, I have to agree. And I think the impetus is on us as a profession to earn the trust of our communities, you know, because of the history of what has happened to Black and Brown folks, you know, at the hands of the medical profession. And so there's definitely a reluctance in our community to get the vaccine. And there's also a difficulty with rolling it out like other vaccines because of the requirements for refrigeration and freezing of the vaccine that other vaccines don't have. So it's that much more difficult to put it into many more areas where you could with other vaccines.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing people that are reluctant to take the vaccine? And if so, what are they saying to you?
It's pretty much, you know, the questions about how safe is the vaccine? You know, will it give me COVID? You know, will it affect my fertility? That's a huge factor. You know, the studies so far haven't been done in pregnant women. And so we don't know what the impact is on those populations. And so it's really been studied in a very specific population. So there are many unanswered questions. And I think that's what's giving people pause in taking the vaccine as well, because it's so new.
Mm-hmm. Kari, how do you combat the mistrust of the vaccine, that whole problem? How do you combat that?
I mean, I think we have to start looking at validators, right? You know, me being in the health profession, I look at, you know, Dr. Gist, and I'm like, I'm gonna trust him, right? But if is Dr. Gist the person that our seniors or our young people will trust, you know? So I think that, you know, the push to get our pastors and our celebrities, and I hear the NBA is going through a difficult time trying to get their stars to promote it. I think the validators go a long way. And I think as a community, you know, we have buckets of validators that we trust.
I'd like to hear from both of you on this. What would you like to see the city do to get more vaccine into the community, deeper into the community? I'll start with you, Ramon.
So I think it's important to use, like you were saying, credible messengers, people who have clout and credibility in the eyes of the community. And even sometimes, you know, that doesn't work. You know, we saw famously the example of the nurse who was the first person in the US to get the vaccine, who was a Black woman, and it was given to her by a Black doctor who was also a woman. And despite that, there was so much pushback, even with that narrative. And so it's going to take a lot more of those on the ground, person to person conversations, you know, from, you know, your spiritual leaders and folks like that are going to be able to convince folks to get the vaccine. It has to be at a global level and also at the individual level.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Kari?
I mean, look, I don't think the rollout has been well coordinated, because if I know that I pull out 1,000 vaccines, and once they're mixed and I'm in a school gymnasium, that if people don't show up, I'm gonna have to throw it out, then I think that we're going to end up wasting it, right? I think what needs to be done, the appointment conversation was a good start, but what we've been doing at Brookdale is my counterpart or my replacement actually has called me and said, can we get 20 or 30 people in the community? You grab them, you bring them down. Here's your appointment. Your appointment is from 1 to 2. it's been a great success, right? You know, we reach out to community-based organizations. Look, you have a slot from 2 to 4. I need you to bring 50 people. And so we saw that there's been less waste by doing it that way than actually asking seniors or folks that don't have computers to make an appointment online, then they miss the appointment. We go and pick them up. And if we can't physically pick them up, we contact them, we remind them of their thing, and then we walk them through the process. And I think, you know, I want to give kudos to Brookdale that they've been doing a wonderful job with that as it pertains to these hour slots that we've been able to move people in and out.
Yeah, I can see where that might work well as far as seniors are concerned, because now they're going with friends to do this together and that sort of thing. So
Right.
there's kind of a more of an acceptance of it at that point.
Right.
Now, Joe Biden says that things should return to normal by around Christmas, and he expects there to be enough vaccine for everyone by the end of July. Are you buying it? What do you say, Kari?
I mean, I'm buying it. Listen, I'm going to tell you guys, I had COVID, right? And it was the worst 17 days of my life. And I wasn't going to die, you know, but I felt like I was going to die. So mentally, it took me to places that I never want to go again. And working in a hospital that lost over 660 people to this virus is eye-opening. And so I believe if we get the shots into people's arms, I believe if folks start to take this thing seriously. A senior said to me, listen, if this thing gives me cancer, or makes me go 3 heads in 3 years, I still have 3 years that I've lived versus dying in 3 days. And I think that's part of the narrative that we really need to express to folks. Like, I took the vaccine myself and I had antibodies, right? I tested for antibodies. I definitely had it. So for me, I'm good. I wish more people would do it.
Mhm. What do you think there, Ramon? You buying it? Christmas?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you know, there is an interest in all ends in bringing this to a closure. Unfortunately, human behavior has not been enough to alter the course of the virus. So we certainly need the vaccine to go into as many arms as possible to control this as best as possible.
Mhm. What would your message be to New Yorkers who might be on the fence, Kari?
Again, I'm a standing example, right? You know, earlier when people would say COVID survivor, you know, we laughed it off, but like that's a reality. Like you really survived something that could have taken your life. And what we're trying to do, you know, we're doing a forum on Sunday around it. You know, every time I turn around, the health professionals are out with the clergy and they're doing forums. I mean, I really think that this thing has to be taken seriously. I'm trying to convince my wife. She doesn't want to jump the line, but I'm like, you know, she was next to me every day that I was going through this. And it's something that I wish on no one. And whatever we can do to save lives at this point, I really think that folks need to do it.
Dr. Gist, what's your message to New Yorkers who might be on the fence?
You know, likewise, I too had COVID back in early March, and I had a pretty benign course, but you know, my asthma was exacerbated in a way that I had not felt it since I was a child. And so I don't want anyone to go through that. You know, I've also seen folks die from COVID, and I don't want to see folks go through that again. And remember, it's our communities that are being affected the most by this virus, and the underlying disparities in our healthcare system are being brought to the surface by this virus. And also other communities are coming into our community and taking away our shot through vaccine tourism. So that should show all of us that this is important. People are coming to get their shot. So we should not give away our shot, right? We should take the shot, protect ourselves, protect our loved ones in our community.
Yeah, it kills me when I hear someone say, we went to the hood to get the shot.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Vaccine tourism has to end.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there. I want to thank our guest, the Director of Pediatric Critical Care at SUNY Downstate Medical Center, Ramon Gist, and the former Vice President of Brookdale Hospital, Kari Edwards. Thank you both. We're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with some final thoughts. I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is Let It Rip.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Now for some final thoughts. While the rollout of the vaccine has accelerated and it's making its way through some communities, the effort is lagging in many Black and Brown communities hit hardest by the pandemic. More must be done to get the vaccines into the arms of those who are most at risk and then the full population. But that's going to take more than just making the vaccine available through community centers or mobile vans. While those things help, there's also the issue of people in our communities not wanting to take the vaccine for various reasons. Most center on trust. All of this will have to be overcome before we can put this horrible pandemic that has claimed so many lives and damaged the economy so much behind us. I can't tell you to go and get the vaccine. That's a personal medical decision. But I will say this, I would, and I think that everyone who can get it should get it. Now, student loan forgiveness is a tough one. I hear the arguments from both sides. I'm getting crushed by this debt. There are no jobs now that I've graduated. I'll never be able to pay this. Or the others who say I sacrificed a lot to pay off my student loans. You shouldn't be able to borrow money for school and then just have it wiped out by the government or by declaring bankruptcy. Maybe they'll cancel $50,000 for each person, or maybe $10,000, which some say would not help. Or maybe they come up with a combination of things to ease the burden, like canceling some debt and lowering and freezing interest at 0% or allowing people to refinance at a lower rate. People are struggling and they need help. We'll see what happens, but many support canceling up to $50,000. It's still a hot button and emotional issue that will take a lot of serious work to fix. We'll stay on it. That's it for now. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Gilliam, and we'll see you next time on Let It Rip.